Jennifer Faler from Bureau of Reclamation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Directors. I have a presentation with me today, and let's share. So I'll jump right in. Next slide. These are the updates I'll be providing today. I do intend to continue providing updates on all these projects as we go throughout the year. They're all very important projects, may even add to the list with the Board of Directors here. So they're north to south, as you can see, but if you don't mind, I will start with the federal assessment team, the 6 Middle Rio Grande Pueblo assessment team update, because I don't have any slides. So if I don't give you my update right now, I'll probably forget to give you the update on that one. So I'll start there. There's been a federal assessment team working for the last over a year, meeting with the 6 Middle Rio Grande Pueblos. I think I've mentioned that a few times in our updates. And we've completed mostly completed our work. We've held government to government meetings with all 6 of the Pueblos. We're essentially looking into the interests of everybody wanting to move to a negotiation team is the next step in the process of if the assessment team is created to see if we think a settlement is possible. As you know, the United States held out for quite a while because we didn't think a settlement was possible in a basin that's unadjudicated, over allocated. We've been convinced throughout this process by the state of New Mexico that it is possible to have a settlement in this basin. And so we're gauging the level of interest, as I said, from all 6 Pueblos. They are very interested in moving forward to a negotiation team. They made that very clear to us. We are setting up meetings. We have a meeting on the books with you all to get your level of interest as well. We'll also meet with folks like the Water Authority, probably City of Rio Rancho. Not required before our report is done, but good to hear different perspectives as we're wrapping up our report. So we are hoping to get that done before a key milestone this year, which would be an election, and get everything wrapped up before any potential new administration. So that's ongoing. That's the update there. And we'll talk more in our meeting. Moving up to El Vado, next slide. The contractor is wrapping up and demobbing from El Vado and is expected to be complete by the end of September. The next step was a value planning study. We did get that on the books and we're happy to have it in September. Our value planning facilitators are all very busy people. We are planning a 3-day value planning study. There'll be a kickoff. There'll be an opportunity for the members to come tour El Vado, especially anybody that might not have seen it prior to the actual 3-day event for the value planning. And then there'll be a wrap-up meeting as part of that. So we're really looking forward to getting that moving. Want to thank the district for the offer to provide consultants to that. It's something that we talked about in our principals meeting up in Denver in February as an offer of having an outside perspective in the room. So we feel that will be very important. And so those folks, we've conveyed all the material to them. They have all the background material and we're continuing to coordinate with them on finalizing the value planning study. And I know of primary interest to you all, you get credit for that. And we are looking into how to do that. It's not a normal thing for a safety of dams project. We are going to have to update our repayment contract anyway. So I'm optimistic that we will be able to reimburse the district for those costs because they're costs that the United States would have incurred anyway. So we just don't have a mechanism in place right now to do that, but we should. We have also started, I think I've mentioned this, we have a standard well-established approach to ensuring the suitable performance of our facilities after we have performed any construction at our facilities. In the case of El Vado, that will include slowly filling the reservoir and monitoring and analyzing as we're filling the reservoir, the level of seepage through the embankment. The plan is to first fill up to 6805. The current restriction, and you have the restrictions there, and I'm sure you can get copies of these slides if you don't have them already. We're keeping the reservoir at 6785 through construction. We will, once the contractor demobilizes in September, we're looking to start in October to bring it up to 6805. Hold it there for a minimum of 10 days as we do this analysis and monitor the seepage. That's about 12,600 acre feet of water. Then, depending on what we see, bring it up to 6810, so 5 more feet. That would be 16,000, approximately 300 acre feet of water. Hold it there for 30 days of monitoring and make a determination at that point. If we feel like we can keep filling, we would go another 10 feet to 6820 for a total of 25,000 acre feet. I mentioned the volumes because we are looking for that water. We're talking to San Manchama contractors right now to see if we can borrow your water to do move it from Heron down to Avado so that we can do this first fill. We don't have enough of our own water to do that. So that coordination is ongoing. And we would hold it at 6820 at that point, and then we'll wait for next year's spring runoff and go from there. So we hope to learn a lot during that process toward the end of this year. That is the Avado update.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we had a public, we had during public comment, a request or a question about water levels coming up for the purposes of the power plant. But that's, from what we're hearing today, that's not really the intended purpose. It's really just to test the ability for the dam to be able to store and hold water as a rising elevation. It's not really the primary purpose is not for the power plant, correct?
Correct. We are contractually obligated to keep it below 6785, which is below the power plant's ability. So if it's up, it's just because we're not able to move it out fast enough. So we will have to bring it down to 6785.
No.
I thought I heard a question, but I wasn't clear.
Yeah, so there is a question that there is about water rising for the purposes of operating the power plant, but this is the water. What you're doing is to test the integrity of the dam itself. Thank you.
For storage, evaluate ongoing storage. Our current reservoir restriction, it couldn't be more confusing because it's 6785 for construction and it's 6875 is our current restriction. That's when we didn't know as much as what we know about the reservoir today. So we need to ultimately determine what that 6875 turns into. Be great if it is 6875, just like it was before construction. We're not there right now.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Covered. All right, next slide. Director Harron, the sediment plug. We have just some great pictures, so I couldn't help but bring these in. And speaking of the water coming in a fury, I think we also heard from the public. This is a great example of that. Back in June, the Arroyo La Madera received a large rain event in its watershed, enough to bring down sediment / sand to fill the channel 4 to 5 feet deep, 100 feet wide, 1.5 miles long. It's an extraordinary amount of sediment that came down in Arroyo up in the Rio Chama watershed. Next slide. So we mobilized out there, as was mentioned. The state of New Mexico provided us some funding. This is outside of our jurisdiction. We have river maintenance authorities here in the Rio Grande, in the middle Rio Grande. We do not have authorities up in the Chama. So the state asked us to mobilize and get the water back in the channel, flowing south. That was our mission. And concerned it might become, brought these pictures also. It was also just mentioned that we're concerned this is going to become more of the norm and not so much an emergency situation, and none of us are really prepared for that. So really want to get the word out that one rain event can turn into this pretty quickly. So next picture. Found out right away. We tried to use dozers. That's the fastest way to clear a channel. The liquefaction was significant up there, so dozers weren't going to work. Next slide. We had to bring the big toys. That is a track of an amphibious excavator on a low boy, just to give you a feel for how big our amphibious excavators are. We have 2 of them. The excavator without the tracks is on the other low boy. Next slide. These are the amphibious excavators. We have 2 of them. The other ones that are not the amphibious excavators are on a coconut mat. So every time they move, somebody has to move the mats forward so they don't sink. But the amphibious excavators are good to go. Oh, it's a video. Amphibious excavators can traverse a channel like this without a problem. I hope this video doesn't run too long. Just to give you an idea, that's 3 excavators working side by side. I think we were able to get the dozer operating to help continue to move the sediment. But again, our job was to cut this pilot channel. It was all filled with sand, so all that material is being moved onto the bank. Next slide. And this looks similar. Okay, let's go to the next slide. That's about what, oh, that's a video too. And we can cut these off. This is this is the channel that Ann had mentioned. It's at this point it's passing 100 CFS. It is now able to pass 600 CFS. We had a go back. They were up at 500. They went to 600 and it left the channel. So we had to go remobilize and shore up some of the areas. It's actually a bridge crossing that was filled with tires and all kinds of junk that got backed up and caused it to leave its channel again. So significant effort. I think that's the last picture. Probably move to the agencies that we coordinated with to get all this work done. State Engineer, Interstate Stream Commission, funding, Corps of Engineers, operating ABQ. Unfortunately, a lot of the acequias have been impacted and still are not able to divert water up there. There's still a lot of sediment to be dealt with. This is a federal emergency was declared, so these folks will be able to get assistance. Reclamation's charge was just to get the water moving south, and we're demobilizing now from this. All right, next are, speaking of conveyance and river conveyance, we've have about 5 projects we've been working in the Santa Casia Reach for the last several years now. I think you're familiar with a lot of these. I'll just hit a few of them quickly. And again, I'll keep you informed of these projects ongoingly. Let's go first slide, River Mile 60, I believe is the first project that'll come up. We did the River Mile 60 project. It's at an area where the low flow conveyance channel heads off to the west and where the river has an odd bend to it. We constructed the project to provide a more efficient route. The low flow conveyance channel has drain water. There's perhaps some MRGCD tailwater makes it down to this point, but it's essentially a drain. The low flow conveyance channel is a drain in the valley. So the drain water that comes down now has a way where we can drop it directly into the channel, the river channel, versus it flowing off to the western area there. There's some details about the construction we completed last year. Oh, the goal of the project is to improve water delivery. The constraint is impacts to federally listed bird habitat and bird species. And next slide, this is an adaptive management process. When you're working with biological species and you're afraid to do anything because you might get crosswise with Endangered Species Act, adaptive management is a good way forward with bringing the biologists to the table and say, let's come up with these hypotheses, let's test them, let's change our operations. If things work, great, let's continue to do that. If they don't work, let's retool. So it allows you to be more risky in your operations when it comes to impacting species that are listed. So those are the questions that in a collaborative effort, we've worked with MRGCD folks and Fish and Wildlife Service to come up with these adaptive management questions that we're evaluating, and it's informing our operations year to year. So those are the questions. Next slide is the results of our 23 operations, how they are informing our current 2024 plan. Essentially, we're working on reducing the amount of water that's flowing off to the west, to the habitat areas, to determine a point where we're no longer impacting. How much water can we save? Well, the first question was, is it more efficient to put it in the channel versus having it come down the way it's been coming down for several years now? Because not everybody convinced it's going to be more efficient to put in the channel. Assuming that is the case, we want to optimize what's going into the channel for deliveries to Elephant Butte without negative impacting habitat that we don't have coverage for if we do damage that habitat. And we do have some coverage for, it's called taking habitat over there. So we're walking that fine line with MRGCD at the table saying, we want all the water in Elephant Butte. The Fish and Wildlife saying, we'll work with you, but in Reclamation, straddling that line saying, we want both. How do we get there from here? So that's the update on the operations plan. Next slide. Those two realignment projects, I didn't bring any slides on those today. I figured I'd be talking enough. I can update you on those projects. One of them's complete, the lower realignment. We realigned 3 miles of river. We're working on realigning the next 5 miles, which will basically cover the entire BDA reach. And this project is a large project. Our motto is go big or go home down in the Santa Casia Reach. And we are looking to improve the water deliveries as we're talking about, create the aquatic and riparian habitats, potentially take pressure off the valley up here for these species if we're able to manage them effectively in this lower reach, and increase the benefits of our maintenance actions by working with geomorphic trends. We are fighting the river in this area. We're spending lots of money and effort. It's a good part of the reason why we have those amphibious excavators, is because we have to work to fight the river to keep the water moving south in this area. So we want to do a complete reset on the channel so we can stop fighting against the geomorphic trends and start working with them, which will be more efficient for habitat maintenance, bang for the buck, and water conveyance. Next slide. So this is just an illustration. I know you can't read that, of the current condition. Reclamation years back put the river where it is. It's either got levees on each side or there's an embankment, or mesas on the east side. So we put the river here. It's been here for 60, 70 years. And it, as all the sediment that we talk about, we've seen, it all ends up down here. We are partially in the Elephant Butte Reservoir Delta area. So there's just a lot of sediment to deal with this in the area. So the river gets taller and taller and taller, and it loses its connection with, it'll flow out into a floodplain and it'll never come back in the channel. We're now at a point where if we're not able to realign the river, we're going to have a significant levee raise to keep the river in this channel, because it's every year we're concerned about it overtopping the levees down there. So that's the current condition. What we want to move to is move the river out of that inefficient area where we're fighting the geomorphic trends and move it to the lowest point of the valley where it can become more of a natural system again, to benefit conveyance, because it can fix itself. It can anastomose if it's running into sediment problem here, it'll realign itself. And it will have improved habitat, having its floodplain back, and the maintenance that we do will be more efficient. We'll come up with a maintenance plan to make sure this is a long-term. We expect this to be at least a 30-year fix for conveyance inefficiencies in this area. So that's the, sorry, I think the last slide is.
Jennifer,
Yes.
can I ask a question on this slide? To clarify, my understanding, a proposed alignment and a determination of whether or not the low flow or a version of the low flow would exist has not been selected. Is that correct?
Very good point. Also in this project, the River Mile 60 was intended to be temporary, to fix a temporary problem while this project is working through its process. The current low flow conveyance channel, I don't know the river miles. We have two alternatives. In both alternatives, the low flow conveyance channel terminates and flows into this new channel around Bosque del Apache. One of them's a little further down. So it will permanently resolve the LFCC conveyance issues once we're able to move forward with this project, create a new channel that is efficient, and drop the low flow into it for a single channel system, single conveyance system. There is an alternative that maintains a second high flow channel that will also just be used when there's a lot of water down there. It'll convey in 2 different channels. I'm not sure, the feasibility study's chugging along. I think it's starting to show one's better than the other. I'm not sure which one, but either way, the existing low flow conveyance channel will stop well before it stops today and above River Mile 60 in both cases.
So, Madam Chair, members of the board, Jennifer, I wasn't aware that you had reached that point, that you had chosen for the low flow to go away.
Oh, to go away?
Yeah, I didn't. I don't think we were aware that that alternative has been chosen for the low flow to cease to exist in this location. Okay, that is
the 2-channel option. It's still, I thought it was above River Mile 60. It might be below River Mile 60, but it doesn't go all the way down to the current outfall of the low flow.
Right. Madam Chair, members of the board, staff and I will follow up on that and report back. The reason why I ask is, I saw up there the low flow filled where necessary. And it was, I did not have the understanding that the federal government has chosen to eliminate that yet. I thought it was still part of a 2-channel system versus a single channel system. And so we have some inquiries to make, to figure
There's
out.
other drains and things in this area. One of the things that will take a lot of pressure off of our River Mile 60 operations is to come up with a plan for these listed species that we're talking about. We've had the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation coming up with a plan. The habitat that's down there has been good for the birds. It's aging out. Everybody wants us to start moving, Fish and Wildlife Service wants us to start moving the birds north out of the reservoir pool, which is great for reclamation. We don't want endangered species in our reservoirs. Get those birds moving south by creating habitat further and further south. So we're waiting on the plan from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to say, these are the areas. And in part of it, the habitat's only good for about 15 years. So you need to be building the new habitat about every 5 years if you're wanting to provide long-term habitat for these birds. So once we have that plan in our hands, I think everybody will take a breath and say, okay, there's a plan for these birds because they're living in habitat that's dying off basically, or aging out, they call it. And we need to come up with that plan. And I'm bringing all this up because some of these old remnant channels might be the future water supply for those areas.
Yeah.
So use this old channel to get, when you're going to have habitat here, create this habitat here for these 10 years, create habitat over here. So we'll need to look at all of that before we make a decision about filling things in.
Yeah. So Madam Chair, members of the board, the reason why I ask Jennifer this question is from a technical standpoint, obviously, I think the board knows my background's river mechanics, river maintenance, and technically a single channel solution would be efficient and could be the most efficient solution if it can be maintained. And Jennifer talked about the maintenance of it. One of our comments has consistently been that there's still hesitation from MRGCD to want to abandon a system. Maybe the river needs to move and the low flow maybe needs to move with it, but it was hard to transport water through this area 70 years ago. It's still hard today. And technically, as the CEO of the MRGCD, I do believe a single channel could work and could be the most efficient solution if it can be maintained. But I also believe that there's history to show that a single channel concept would be difficult to maintain. So that's part of the crux of our comments back and our desire to understand that with the federal government, because as we know, funding changes, those kinds of things. And Jennifer is doing the best job that she can now, but it's hard to guarantee, even for us as an organization, to guarantee funding in a certain direction for something. And so I will say I'll be following up with Jennifer. I'll be following up with Reclamation. To date, I don't believe I have received enough information to present to you to say that the not reconstructing the low flow further south to a degree, and I know that it's going to continue to exist at the very least to Bosque del Apache, but I do think I haven't seen enough information to provide to you and tell you as the MRGCD board that elimination of that secondary channel further south, that I believe that's a good idea yet. But I will. I'll follow up. This has got my mind now flowing that we need to follow up on how far we are into that process. So Jennifer, thank you for presenting. This is it's good. I think it's good to be transparent and have this conversation in front of the board. But technically, and I'll say it again, because I have lots of engineering friends out there, lots of people who do modeling. Technically, a single channel would be the best way. But the models have a hard time looking at what happens when you have 2 years of drought. You don't have enough water. Vegetation encroachment comes in. Can we traverse 20 miles in a year, keep that vegetation out so that channel is ready for efficient water movement when we have water? And I think myself, I can't speak for the state. My hope is the state would have the same concern and that we need to get those answers.
Thank you, Mr. Kusuga, and I will say MRGCD, the state of New Mexico, the non-governmental organizations that operate down there are critical partners to us, along with the districts down south that we're working to deliver this water to. So Reclamation isn't doing this project because it's our mission and we're just going to do it. We're doing it for everybody. And so we're wide open for impact and we want to build the right project. It's going to be a significant expenditure. We're going to ask for the funding. We don't actually have the funding for this. It's more than money than we've ever spent on a project if it's not an Indian water rights settlement or a safety of dams project. So if we are fortunate to get the funding, we want to build the right project and meet as many needs as we possibly can with this project. So we welcome the input as we work through this process. Which is the next slide is the schedule. We are in the EIS, the NEPA phase and the feasibility study. So the feasibility study is churning along. We have partner meetings with MRGCD in the state of New Mexico because everybody has expertise in those agencies on the river. So we'll continue to move that forward and select an alternative out of that feasibility study that will be wrapped up in the NEPA, in the EIS, the drafts next summer. And the final the year after, starting construction in 2026. This is wrapped up in a reclamation process for making a major change to a reclamation project. This is our river maintenance program is a reclamation project. And to make a major change like this, we're working through our policies and standards and hitting every step along the way, which is what makes us hopeful we'll be able to get this funding. So I believe that concludes my report this time. Happy to take any questions.